Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call the Facilities and Operations Subcommittee meeting for Monday, December 14th, 2020 to order. Madam Secretary, roll call, please.
Mr. Costa?
Here.
Mr. Hart?
He just left the meeting.
And Mr. Hetzel?
Here.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr.
we
Costa?
just have the record reflect that Mr. Hart and I are both virtually at this meeting.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let the record reflect that they are both virtual. Paul Hart and Mark Costa are joining us virtually. Hey,
I'm
Paul.
sorry about that, I'm here.
Welcome back.
I'm sorry about that.
All right. Moving on to, we're going to salute the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Pursuant to the open meeting law, any person may make an audio or video recording of this public meeting or may transmit the meeting through any medium. Attendees are therefore advised that such recordings or transmissions are being made, whether perceived or unperceived, by those present and are deemed acknowledged and permissible. Do we have any citizens input?
We do not.
All right, up for discussion tonight. Our first topic is discussion and vote to refer submission of statement of interest on the Wiley School windows, boilers, and roof. Mr. Pacheco?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, we actually submitted, or was approved to submit this last year. We pulled it pretty close to the submission date due to some information that was missing on the records. We had a little bit of trouble gathering some stuff at the registry. We do have all of that information now, and we would like permission to put this back to MSBA for an accelerated repair project. The goal from the district is to use this facility to give us some capacity with the stone at Westall, and it also could be used to provide us with some kindergarten capacity throughout the district where some of those class sizes are getting large. Now this year we found that kindergarten took a big hit on numbers, probably about 195 students down from last year. But we're hoping that we make a rebound in September and we get back to our usual about 950 students in kindergarten. So that's going to require us to do a little shuffling across the district, and a facility like this would give us some swing space. The building's in good shape, otherwise it will require some additional funds after MSBA leaves the project, but kind of a Westall, it's obviously a little smaller than Westall. It's a one-unit school as opposed to a two-unit, but it would allow us to have some extra space for us to grow into. So that is the intent. It's boilers, windows, and doors as the MSBA project, and there will be some other ancillary pieces of this puzzle once we move forward.
Excellent. Anything from the committee? Mr. Costa?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Pacheco. I know this vote tonight will simply be to refer to the full committee for consideration. It's just a statement of interest at this point, but I know during budget time there was discussions with the city regarding, sort of pressing the pause button or halting all capital improvements on the school side because we had a number of projects that were already being funded. Has that changed since bringing this back to the subcommittee?
It has not changed. I think the sentiment on the side of the city is that they weren't quite sure on their capacity to continue to move forward with projects. We are finishing up Westall. Tansy is completed. We're finishing up Westall right now, looking for commissioning on the boiler. The roof is completely finished. And with the RPA, boilers are completed, the roof is completed, the ramp is completed, the new main entrance is under construction. So that project is sitting now in a good place. We would have liked to go for windows for that building, but the dollar amount for those windows in RPA is an exorbitant amount of money, and I would think that that would be a project we could not get done right now under the current climate with the city. The Watson project is up for phase 2, so we'll be approaching the city for the remaining funds for that particular project, so that we can finish off the Watson. The Watson's coming along nicely, but that second half will be the expensive side for the city. And they had already agreed to move that one forward. So
Right.
so as you said, the SOI is a non-money portion of this particular project. It's a year-long process. We'll know in April or May whether or not we're accepted, and then at that point, we decide whether or not we want to move into the feasibility. The feasibility study is going to be about $250,000 for the Wiley, of which 80% is reimbursable. And then moving forward after that, this project is going to come in similar to Watson, a little less because of the size. So I'm looking at probably maybe a $3 million project of roofs, windows, and boilers, of which 20% of that particular cost, 80% of that cost will be reimbursable.
Right, so my question is, obviously, the city has in its budget set amount of capital improvement budgeted for the entire city. I know that Ms. Sahadi, during the budget talks, was concerned about having capacity available in operating budgets going forward, not just for the schools, but certainly for the entire city. I just want to make sure, I don't mind voting for it. I think it's wise to do so, particularly I think when it comes to SBA reimbursement, we've done really well working with that agency. I just want to make sure that we don't approve this, and then in April, when it comes time to discuss the feasibility study and the $250,000, although 80% is reimbursed, that at that point the project gets halted because the city doesn't have the ability to bond or to borrow for this project. So as long as that discussion takes place and we keep it on the radar screen of the city finance team, I'm certainly in favor of it. Like I said in my earlier comment, this project, or at least this vote, doesn't require any funding at this stage, and so I'll make a motion to forward. I know other members will probably have some discussion on it, but I'll make a motion to forward to the full committee the proposal that's before the subcommittee at this point.
Well, I'll make that second, and on that second, I don't have any questions. Pretty much the question that Mr. Costa asked that I was gonna ask, so I'm all set with any questions on this matter.
Excellent, so a motion has been made by Committeeman Costa, seconded by Committeeman Hart. Any further discussion? All right, Madam Secretary, roll call.
Mr. Costa?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes,
Mr. Hudson?
Yes. Okay, next up for discussion, tonight we have the athletic infrastructure and capital needs discussion. Mr. Pacheco?
Sure, so as we start getting closer and closer to the completion of the new high school, a hard look at our athletic infrastructure is necessary. So the two artificial surface fields, our football practice and our stadium, those carpets are just about at the end of their useful life. We had a GMAX test done on them, if I'm not mistaken, about 2 months ago, and they said we had about a year's worth of life left in them. We have a couple of areas that needed to have some corrections, repairs, but we do have a clock on those particular fields. Once they can't pass that test, then we can't play on them. the surface will be too hard, and the chances of students getting hurt would become a serious situation. So I think that we need to look at overall the entire athletic complex, so to speak. We have a baseball field that's underwater, not as much as it used to be, but it still has its flooding issues. A lot of the new drainage at Durfee High School has taken into consideration the problems we had with the runoff from the 5 acres of conservation land between Tansy and Durfee, but also the low-lying area and the wetlands, which are directly tied into Durfee at the corner of our property on Ellsbury Street. So we have that issue with a baseball field. We are short a soccer field right now. We are short a JV baseball field, and field hockey is being played on the turf. So I think to move forward, we need to take a look at the existing land that we have. We do have some wooded areas surrounding our fields outside of that wetland and conservation area. We do have some land available that we could possibly piggyback 2 fields together, the softball field and put a JV baseball field. As long as the games don't coincide, we would have no issues with those fields being played on. We also have the option, if we replace the carpet on the practice field, that we could put a softball field into that mix on that particular artificial surface. We do know that in 2022, we will have an additional all-purpose field up on the tiers where the current high school stands, and that will provide us with other fields to expand or to maintain our programs. It's very difficult to put a dollar figure on if we're doing this one by one. Obviously, you got mobilization and all of the things that come with bidding a process singly, but if we take the whole project as the whole need as one project and design it so that we're going to utilize the contractors and the on-site people as much as we possibly can, we may be looking at some considerable amount of savings, the economy of scale. My gut feeling, what is telling me that what we should do is we need to have a design, so to speak, of what we're looking for and what we can fit into the property, and then we need to have that move to the next level, which would be out of schematic design and into full design and construction, and then we could put that process out to bid. My guess is the project as a whole would be anywhere from $4.5 million to about $7 million. My feeling is that once we do the design work, then we can go and prioritize all of the work that has to be done and decide how we'd like to do that project. This would require additional funds from the city, of which we would have to figure out how that would happen. But depending on what we have for insurance, the healthcare number that is owed to the school department, we should be able to do the initial design work schematic and do the construction design work using those funds, if that was something that the school committee was interested in doing. Tying all of that stuff together with the new high school will give us a lot of versatility with playing fields, and will also allow us to have that first class athletic complex to go along with the high school.
Mr. Hart?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The thing, I just want to go, maybe take one step at a time with this. From what I just heard, the carpet at both the main stadium and the practice field,
Yes.
currently right now as it exists, which carpet will be replaced first?
So the carpets are identical in wear and age. So the hope would be to replace the two of them at one time. And again, the economy of scale, the price is going to be better if we're replacing them both. So as an overall picture, my best guesstimate on replacing those carpets as a pair would be about anywhere from 1.6 to 1.8 million.
So I guess my point is the practice field doesn't need to be replaced first because mostly that's what's probably used the most is the practice, correct?
Well, I mean, you got games going on in the football field, but I'm assuming that over the last few years, we've had some practices on that football field also. So, I mean, on the stadium. If we were going to do one field at a time, then I think those prices, mobilization price and going out for bid with those prices, I think that costs us money. And it might be an easier on the wallet, so to speak, if we put those two as a pair. The baseball field is a whole nother story, but the two fields I would think would be much more economically feasible if we put them out as a pair of fields to be changed at the same time. And then again,
I agree with that, with the two of fitting at the same time, I agree with that, that's fine. When do you anticipate the fields actually being replaced?
so we're gonna have a pretty good idea within the next 60 days, maybe 90 on the outskirt, as to where we stand at the high school on funds. If we have any residual funds, any contingency money left, we'll be in pretty good shape to see that. They're gonna do the best estimate on where we stand with the demolition, and if we're expecting any issues with the demolition. So I would think that time frame wise, it would be very nice to put bids out on those fields, if at all possible, in the month of March, so that we would have those fields worked on beyond that. Now, depending again on when we come back to school, and in what capacity we come back to school, is also gonna come into play, because obviously we need fields to play on, and we'll have to take that into consideration.
Okay, all right, that's fine. And now with the baseball field, Kenny, the 260 million price tag, the baseball field was never included in that?
No, it was not.
Or was it?
It was not. So no outside, the only field that was included in that price is the new field, which is up on the tiers, the all-purpose field. And that's
Right, and we're thinking of the baseball field temporarily right now is at the North Park facility.
yes,
When and if they do start playing.
Yes.
It's at the North Park facility right
Yes.
now in Bridgeton.
yes.
Okay, where do we see the new field, potentially going in? Where, on campus, at the new campus? Is it going to be the same spot?
It'll be the same spot. The field needs to be elevated. So it needs to come up
I'm
about,
gonna talk to you about that.
yeah, it's about 18 inches to 2
about that
feet.
field.
There's a culvert that needs to be created so that the water catches into the culverts completely around the field, and then those would tie into the new drainage system, so that would relieve all of the water in that particular area. But this would be, the price tag is about 1.7 million, and that's 1.7 million would be an artificial field, artificial turf. So everything would be artificial with the exception of home plate and the pitcher's mound. The remainder would be all artificial. Maybe the base pads, but I don't think it was the base pads. So I think it was pitcher's mound and home plate with the only artificial, the only clay surface that would be located on the baseball field. That would include new dugouts, all of the fencing, and the drainage work that has to be done. And
And
then
the the infield and the outfield are turf.
everything would be turf, yes.
Okay. Now, the only thing that I remember talking to you this back a while ago when I did the tour with you and the superintendent, regarding the baseball field, and you know the history of left field. It's a mess out there, and it's not gonna change until we actually do something about it. And I know, I'm pretty confident that from talking to you about that, and hearing you tonight, that will get resolved. And can we guarantee 100% that will not be an issue?
Absolutely,
New field.
absolutely. By raising that field 18 inches to 2 feet, you're going to be taking it right out of that water level of which everything else is. Now, we don't wanna have our water, we can't let water from our property go over to our neighbor's property, so, as I said, that culvert will be created so that the water always passes around our field, doesn't get into our neighbor's area, and ties directly into the internal groundwater system that we have, which we spent, which we moved closest to that field for this exact purpose. We do have catch basins ready to accept that water from that field area, including obviously the turf. The water goes through the turf into its own drainage system.
Okay, so the money for the baseball field was never included in the 260. I didn't hear you say, where are we gonna come up with that money
So
for the new baseball field?
all of these items, anything that we're talking about outside of the small money would have to come from a city bond issue.
Okay. And right now, as Vice Chairman Costa stated, it is, right now, there's a temporary freeze on these particular projects, but I would think and hope that obviously when we get over this pandemic, if we ever do get over it, but maybe stabilize it, that I do hope that we can start opening the doors up a little bit for these particular projects. That need, they're very important to the city, there's no question about it, for the school here. But this particular project has the baseball field, and anybody that knows or has played at that field before this new campus has been built, was an absolute. And you had to bring in the left field at certain points. If it rained on a particular bad day, the team couldn't even play on that field, and they had to go play at the other team's home field. So it's been a major issue for at least 25 years. Am I correct?
I'm not sure of that, but I know it's, I've seen the ducks out there, so I can tell you that, other than the ducks playing on that field, it's very difficult to play before the end of May, beginning of June.
Well, it was a major issue when I was there. So I'm gonna get every confidence in the world with what you're closing on this particular project and all projects, but this one especially has been a major thorn, not just on my side, but a lot of other people's, elected officials, staff. So I really do hope that this can be resolved. I'm confident that you're going to get the job done. So with that, I'm going to be glad to support this. Now, I'll make the motion right now for the full body.
Mr. Hart, could you restate that motion for me?
That we send the, I'm sorry, we'll wait until I know there's other people that have to speak on different particular proposals. So I spoke too soon. I'm sorry.
All right, thank you. Mr. Costa?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Within the next 90 days or so, we'll have a better understanding of any available funds from the new project. Is that accurate?
That's my best guess. I'm looking at what's left to do on the project, and with the exception of finding a lot of surprises under the old school, I think that once we get past where we're at right now, crucial point. I know that a lot of the issues that were coming across our table in the last 6 months have all subsided. And it looks like we've got solutions to all of the remaining different requests on the project. So it looks like we're in pretty good shape. And I'm thinking that 90 days from now, we're gonna have a definite idea of what we've got left. The change order log is, as I said, is slowing down the minor stuff, and with the exception of that construction, pre-construction and demo on those other areas, I think we're in good shape.
Right, so I mean, well, basically we have contingency left in a new project that may be available. I mean, these are big ticket, I think, you know, in order to have a better handle on how to proceed, I think one of the questions that come to mind is, you know, how do you fund it? And so, you know, knowing or having a better estimate of the available funds or from the new project would be helpful, and then also what the offset would be in terms of the city's exposure for a bond to replace or to create the new either baseball, the turf fields that exist already up there. So, I mean, at this point, you know, I agree, you know, when you talk economy of scale, it's best to you sort of bundle the price you can, but without having identified a funding source or what total amount is gonna look like, it's difficult to take action on it at this point, not only just for this facilities subcommittee, but also for the school committee as a whole. So I would ask then, through the chairperson, if you can, Mr. Pacheco, you know, begin to identify sort of the cost of this project in its totality and sort of what the funding may look like. I know it'll be an estimate, because right now we don't know what the total amount of available funds will be from project, but I think having some idea of how this is gonna play out in terms of what's already for the new project and what may be available, and also what we may be going back and asking the city to assist and contribute with care. You know, that's another component of this piece, and how much is willing to use of that money for feasibility or I guess to evaluate a project would also need to be a discussion at the full committee. So is that something that sounds reasonable, Mr.
It does. I would say that what I was looking for out of this request was the ability to maybe spend some short money on renderings and basically a layout of how many fields we can fit, where we can fit them, and then we would have a document that we would be able to go out for some general estimates. There are a lot of people who do this kind of stuff for a living that may not necessarily be interested in doing this job for one reason or another, and they'd be willing to sit down with us and say, you know, we've got 3 baseball fields and 2 football fields and a soccer field, and you know, bundling this all together, you're probably looking at X amount of dollars. If I had some renderings, I think it might be easier, both for the committee and for the council, along with the mayor, to take a look at and see exactly what we're talking about. I see it, and I know some of you see it, and you're able to visualize it, but there's a lot of people who need to, you know, to see something else and see it pop and come to life. So there's a lot going on the fields right now, and it's tough to visualize with the high school there and not quite ready yet to where everything is going to be. But I do believe if we have the ability, and I'm not quite sure, I haven't talked to Kevin about a funding opportunity, what kind of money this would cost. to get those renderings, so to speak, and to get basically a survey plan or plot plan of what we're looking to do, but, that one should be easy enough for us to get, before the meeting, if you'd like, so that we have something more to talk about in, next Monday.
Yeah, that's fine, and when Mr. Hart was ready to make a motion, I certainly will support, you know, what you basically just presented, because I agree, have renderings, maybe better to visualize, and then maybe be able to go out for bids, at least preliminary bid, so that the committee will have a better understanding of total cost. By that point, we'll have a breakdown of, what funds may be available from the existing project and what we may be able to, ask the city to contribute, to a capital project, a bond for a capital improvement project. Just a couple of things, you know, we removed a ton of soil, for the new high school. Would it have been advantageous to move some of that up to where the baseball field, you mentioned we're gonna have to elevate that whole area by 18 inches. Seems like, in terms of costs, we move soil, and maybe it wasn't suitable, I don't know from a construction standpoint, but it seems like if we know we're gonna have to elevate, would have made more sense to take an existing soil after maybe it would have been suitable because we weren't really building on it per se, we were just using it to create an elevation. Maybe it would have, instead of hauling truckloads of the dirt and soil out of the project to bring it up and put it up there, so that with the anticipation that we would eventually have to address the flooding issues up there. I don't know, it may not make sense, Mr. Pacheco. I mean, obviously you gotta do the culvert, you have to do some drainage, so maybe, wouldn't have been feasible for us, but now we'll see us have to pay to have soil brought in to elevate that area when we had it right there on site, this whole time. The second piece, or I guess, the other question I had is that I know the committee took action last spring to, you know, pay for, I think it was $10,000, the fixing or the upkeep on North Pond. I noticed that the city did a great job. The dilapidated concrete stand that once existed there. However, I didn't see, or the upkeep to the field that I thought I would see there. Kind of looks like it did prior, 10 grand. So if I can, through the chair, if I can ask that the school committee meeting get an itemized invoice, the work that existed or took place at North Park, because quite frankly, if we were gonna stop playing baseball this spring, there's gonna be another investment needed, because the field doesn't look any different than it did before the committee expended $10,000. So I don't know if some of that money went to the use, if some of that money was used to remove the fallen apart stands that are there, or if that was city money. It looks the same as it did before we invested the money. I know the grass was cut, the weeds were pulled out of the infield, but if you drive by it now, it doesn't look any different than it did before we. So if you can ask, if I can ask through the chair, Mr. Pacheco, if you can find out, maybe the city can share with us some of the invoices of the money expended on that field and where that $10,000 went, just so that we have it for our records. That would be great. Considering they need that field in the spring, it doesn't seem, and I know Mr. Buston is present at the meeting. I don't know that at this point that if he were asked to play, needed to play on the fields, that they would be ready to go in the spring. It looks like they're gonna need another round of improvements before that could happen. So with that, at this point, I'll yield. If a motion is put forth to expend some money for the render, to come up with some renderings, if you will, so that we can go off of that at this. With that, I yield, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Excellent. Mr. Houghton, is there a motion?
Well, I have one question.
Absolutely.
Okay, hey, I agree with Vice Chairman Costa with getting these receipts and seeing what kind of work done on it, but can I just ask you, what work was done? Was the $10,000 used for the field or as a cost? A portion of it for the stands, concrete stands, and the removal of them?
So it was all used on the field. The city had no part in any of that work. That work was done through the school department. So we went there, we hired the contractor, the landscape contractor who cut the mound. Basically, the mound was from where the mound, you see it now, almost all the way to home plate. They just kept adding clay and the mound got larger and larger and larger. It was kind of a tear shape. So that was all cut down. The baselines were mounted so that the ball, it would take some really bad bounces. We were worried that kids were gonna get hurt. So they cut all of those baselines and removed all that extra clay and spread that extra clay in the infield. So all of that work was done, both first base side, third base side, around second and around passing, going to second and around to third. All of those high portions in that grass was taken care of. There was some turf that was put down in front of the mound to recreate the actual round mound. That work was all done by our contractor that we hired. So none of these school department funds were used to take down that wall. That wall was another project that was put out to bid by the city. And it would take,
Of all the sports that we have right now currently at Durfee High School, football, field hockey, softball, baseball, anybody that has to use the outside facilities in the field. Baseball, right now, the only varsity JV and freshman program that has no field on campus.
that, softball is in tough shape too. That field is wet.
They're using cuss.
Yeah, and they're using cuss.
They're using.
They're using the softball field at cuss.
Okay. And also too, I did ask you why the 260 million, it didn't include the baseball field, correct?
Yes, so none of the funds, the only piece that was included in the field was the renovation of the swimming pool. Obviously, the renovations in the gym. So the field house itself, that whole building, is somewhere around $18 million of renovations. And then you have the tiered all-purpose field, which is not built yet. It's gonna be sitting more or less over the main office and that particular wing, the cafeteria area up there, along with the 8 tennis courts that will be rebuilt. So those are all coming in 22, when we knock down the school and we start putting all that up. So the end of 21, going into 22, those fields will start being built up on the hill and tiered. That's all included in the construction project. What's not included was what they took away from the project, and that was the JV field and the soccer field.
Softball field?
And the softball field, I'm sorry.
You probably know this, and I'm just curious why the baseball field and the other fields weren't included in the 260 million. Was it PA issue? So
it's a dollar issue. The original price for Durfee High School, out of the box, was $356 million. So when we started talking, after the feasibility study, with that number of that 356 million, it was basically a direct no, and go back to the drawing board and make it fit. And we basically built the school to fit the budget. So the budget was anywhere from 250 to 270, And what were the non-negotiables of the building were brought into play, and we ended up with the 263, which is where we're at right now. So the exterior of that building, there were feels in that bigger money, the extra $100 million, so to speak. There were some renovations to fields, and the building had a few more bells and whistles than it currently has. The design was a touch different. The field house exterior was in the other bid. The exact extras, I don't have much more than that, but as you can see, as you start slicing and dicing, there are certain things that you can't touch in the project, and there were things that were easier to cut than others, and some of that athletic stuff got cut as it was extra on the outside of the project. With all intentions, to try and get those in, if the project came in, really lower than we thought. And in some areas it did, but in other areas, it came in higher. So, I don't know how we could do anything more than we did with the dollars that we were given. However, I still, have some hope that there are gonna be some extra dollars in the project. Maybe not enough to do any one particular piece, but it will be able to get us a little closer to that end game. And with not knowing the city side as well as I used to, what I can tell you is that there are a lot of projects that are gonna be coming off the city's rolls. The schools that are getting close to 20 years old are gonna be off of the borrowing. And that'll create a little more capacity on the city side, and I'm not saying that it's all us, so to speak. I mean, there are other projects that the city needs to do, but I do believe that as those projects stop peeling away, the capacity for the city to borrow, will be there. And whether the appetite is another story, but I would hate to see a Division I school with less than a Division I facility, and we all want the same thing. So the idea is to come up with that plan, embrace that plan, and figure out how we're gonna get to that finish line. And I think that there may be some creative ways that we can do more with what we have there. And I'm gonna say that the administration is gonna do what they can, obviously, to get us to that point.
No, I absolutely agree. I agree with you 100% that, and for that kind of, for the price tag of a school, we should have already fields, teaching where years ago, you get out of the old dirty ice and you have to walk up to, alumni field to practice. I mean, I don't like seeing that where the field isn't ready for the next school year. The players, even now temporarily, have to walk to North Park to play their game. Everything should be on the campus. But it will happen, now that we're here talking about it, and I just wish we didn't have to talk about it. But I have faith in you, Ken. You do a great job, and I think they will be intact eventually, but that's something we'll have to wait and see what happens. So, Mr. Chairman, I'll make that strong what Mr. said in terms of the renderings for these projects, and to make a spec for that, and to bring it.
Second.
Excellent. So we have a motion made by Mr. Hart and seconded by Mr. Costa. I believe the motion is to allow Mr. Pacheco, we refer to the full committee. We're looking for design work for the fields, the athletic fields, right? A plan that we can act on.
Schematic design
Right, moving
and
forward.
renderings.
All right. Any other discussion? No. So, Mr. Pacheco, I have a few questions.
Yes.
So other than the fields themselves, how about like restrooms, the concession stands, the press box, we're selling tickets, stuff like that? Do we have any needs in that area?
So we do, so the concession stand, I'm not quite sure because it's been a while since we built it, but I know the bathrooms are in great shape. I do believe that the concession stand area, I'm not quite sure if they ended up putting the Ansel system with the full grill set up in that building. That was something that the school department at the time did not wanna take on, that the city, I'm sorry, did not wanna take on when they built that concession stand. So that's an item that we may wanna consider. We do have, the electrical needs met, the plumbing needs met, heating, but we may wanna do a little more with the kitchen. I also would like to think that, there's an awful lot of equipment at Durfee High School that will not be moving with us. So we may have some stuff in the kitchens, in the cooking kitchen, and in the culinary arts area, whether it be friolators or other things that we may wanna move into the concession stand. And we'll salvage some of that equipment that's already there. Some of it is on the newer side that we can take over to the concession stand and upgrade there. The press box, the elevator that goes up to the press box needs work. So we will work on that. That will be part, and I think that we can do that within our facilities budget to be sure that that's all set.
Right, and then anything else that we could add to the planning?
Exactly, so there's a sound system, so the field is in desperate need of a new sound system. So again, I feel that we can handle that within the confines of our own budget, to be able to do the upgrades, in that, particular area. The project is owed a flagpole that would go at the stadium. So that is part of the construction project itself. So,
Excellent. Right, no further discussion?
So, Mr. Chairman, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention, and I think Mr. Pacheco just did, I don't know if I caught it, all of it, but, you know, I think there's been an ask, rightfully so, by folks from Fred and B, to consider an upgrade, obviously, to our audio capabilities and our sound up in the, I think that's important. I know it was brought to my attention a couple of months ago, and I just want to make sure that, I thought I heard you say we may be able to do that work with operations budget. If not, I'd like that to be considered as well, because you're gonna have a state-of-the-art field up there, playing surfaces, and then hopefully when the stands are full of fan, we'll be able to actually hear, what's going on from our sound system. So, if that's something we can do within our own budget, great. If not, if you can, as you, navigate this process of quotes and bid, also include that for our consideration, so we can look at what that makes. It's important that, we look at the big picture and include everything. And then we can decide later what the committee and the city can afford and what the priorities are and make decisions about it then. With that, I yield. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, one more thing.
Yes.
After speaking with, Brad, Buston, on one of the biggest needs we have throughout the complex is storage. So at some point, it would be nice to have a storage unit somewhere in the vicinity of those fields, so that all of that field equipment, that on the sports side of this piece, maybe individual lockers, so to speak, setups, almost like a storage unit by sport. So it would be worth our while looking at that
Have that
in the
included in
future.
your estimate?
Right. So we can do that as part of the estimate, so that we can set something up there.
Right, I think everyone mentioned it'd be important to upgrade this Division I field and our whole athletic infrastructure there at Durfee to, you know, the next level of standard here that goes along with a new building, so if you could take care of that through the design process and the bid process, that'd be great. All right, we have a motion and a second. Madam Secretary, roll call, please.
Mr. Costa?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
Mr. Hudson?
Yes. Excellent, thank you. Next item up for discussion and vote to refer is HVAC job description. Mr.
Mr.
Pacheco.
Chairman, motion to approve that item.
Motion has been
Yeah,
made,
I'll second that.
second has been made.
I mean, if I can just ask through the chairman, now that the motions are made, just a brief overview. Obviously, it'll get a lot more discussion at the full committee, but, my read of it is it makes sense. It's gonna, put on the wait time, take a little pressure off our plumbing department. The salary range falls within, I think, a salary range is reasonable, and given probably the amount of money we're spending on contracted services to have someone come in and do that work falls when our plumbing staff gets overwhelmed, so I think at this point, it's a no-brainer, and Bentley will support it. Thank you, I yield.
Excellent. Mr. Pacheco?
So the position would be an additional position, it's an added FTE. It was not in the SOI money, nor was it in the regular budget when we presented the regular budget. However, at the time, the plumbing need was higher than the HVAC need. With the COVID situation, our HVAC systems are being monitored and repaired, and also filter changes are twice as much as they used to be. So the load, which is falling on the one HVAC person we have right now, is overwhelming. The plumber helps out when they can, and of course they're taking away from doing their regular work. So the request to add this position is new. It was not something that was part of that SOI, the SOA, but it is, I think, a critical need that will allow us to stay on top of what we need to stay on top of, do some extra PM work that we can't get to right now, and remove some of the work from the private contractor to free them up to do the larger work, which we wouldn't take on anyway.
Excellent. Any other discussion? Hearing none, motion has been made and seconded. Madam Secretary, roll call, please.
Mr. Costa?
Yes,
Mr. Hart?
Yes,
Mr. Hudson?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, for the full committee, correct?
Yes. Mr.
Thank
Costa.
you.
All right, next item up for discussion, vote to prefer plan for Pace Center and auditorium building. Mr. Pacheco?
So the report that you have is a draft, but it is, it's called the Chapter 34 Code Review. And basically, we paid for this report to be put together for two reasons. Number one, to be sure that the building itself had the capacity to do what we needed it to do under the circumstances that we needed to operate under, but also just what we're looking at for upgrades to that building, both fire protection, HVAC. When the bridge gets cut off for the second time from this building, when it gets cut off permanently, that particular building will be a standalone. Currently, everything from our heating, cooling, all of our infrastructure needs are coming from the main building. So this building, once it gets cut off in July, will be standalone. So some of these things we have to bring into this project. The gas piece is coming into this project now, so that piece is going to be taken care of. I'm sure we can recall a couple of years ago when we replaced the chillers at Durfee High School. We replaced one chiller with two smaller chillers. One of those chillers is going to go to this building. It's going to be moved probably sometime in February or March over to this building, so the air conditioning will be done in this building. The other chiller is going to go to Green, which needs a chiller. So that's going to put those two back into reuse. And then when Durfee opens up for full hybrid or full occupancy in May and June, we'll rent a chiller to take care of that building for the short amount of time it's got to run. So this code review and this document shows us all of those things and then a little bit more. We do have a fire system to put in this building, both fire suppression and fire alarm. So the start of that was already done in the PACE, and we're going to continue from that, but this building will be a standalone and not a slave to the main building. The building has an address, and that will be a standalone fire system. So all of those things a part of this review, and this review is broken up into phases. I wanna say there's 4 phases to the construction part of this building. But what I'd like the, move forward with this is we will get, a very good handle on what is critical needs to be done by June. And that's not much. I need to move in the special ed, department, which is, currently housed over the cafeteria at Durfee. That entire area, so the size of the cafeteria is the size of the sped department upstairs from that. And that department needs a home. So we'd like to move them into the PACE area. We're not quite sure where it's gonna work into that overall building, but, that'll happen. We also would like to move our entire, store, or all of our facility and operations, from Henry Lord and from Cuss into this building, which would free up space in both of those schools for other activities that could happen, whether it be CTE programs or whether it be other classrooms. This will free up that space in the educational facilities and allow us to house all of the operations in this one building. So it's a starting point. It was something that was required by the city, this chapter 34 review. It gives us that starting point, but it also allows us to sit with the building department and the fire department to figure out what we can do and what we can't do moving forward. It would be an enormous undertaking to completely sprinkle this entire building, with suppression. However, there may be areas that are not going to be occupied. Remember, the use of the building changes from school to general here, and it's going to allow us to do certain things in phases. So the building will have a complete fire alarm system put in throughout the building. However, the fire suppression would be built in phases as the building gets occupied, and then to a complete system eventually in somewhere around phase 2 to 2 and maybe into 3. The building does have some needs, as you can read in the report. The roofs are desperate, but we do have the overall package, and this, as I said, is the starting point.
Mr. Costa?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I can just ask the question at this point, so my understanding has always been that once a facility was no longer used for educational purposes, the school committee would take a vote, turn it back over to the city. Are we anticipating that this will sort of be a mixed use, where it'll be used for educational purposes as well as have the availability of the city to use? And the reason I ask that is, we're obviously having discussions about upkeep and improvement to that particular standalone once it does become a standalone. What does that mean in terms of our responsibility for funding for upkeep, and how much of that falls, to the city to determine what investment they're gonna make in the building? And I know that there's some grant money out there, if I'm not mistaken. I think you and I have talked about that, Mr. Pacheco, where sort of can be a split between the school and the city. But a little bit about that, so that anybody who's listening is wondering, okay, well, if the new school's got its own auditorium, and this is gonna be a standalone, is it gonna be run by the city, operated by the city, funded by, gonna be a share with, just so everybody's clear?
Sure, so the ultimate plan would be to divide the building into 2 with an imaginary separation somewhere in the main lobby of the auditorium. Taking 50% of that building and using it for back office administration, payroll. Again, moving all of the back office stuff from buildings that have students in them and the capacity to have students in them, like 290 Rock, moving all of those adults in those buildings and those operations into this facility. On the other 50% of the building, you would have a performing arts ready-made area, a capacity of over 1,200 in the auditorium. The wing, the last meeting we were talking with the National Guards to use. It's an ideal situation that facility would definitely be available for funding through different agencies. Cultural Council would have money available. There would also be opportunities for us to have an operator of that facility, along if the city so chose to do it that way, so that the building would always be rented. It would have its own funding source to do all of its repairs on that portion of the building. So by splitting the building 50% each way, those grants would be available, because the grants are very specific that it must be 50% of the building in order to apply those grants. It may be able to pay for the heating system for the entire building, but 50% of it would have to be engaged in the arts in order to allow that funding source to be used. So that would be the ultimate goal. It's a 90,000 square foot building in total. It's almost identical to the field house in size, and its capacity for what we need it for. 50% of that building is an enormous amount of square footage, and we have more than enough room to empty out 3 other buildings and put it all under one facility. It'll also make the PACE Center a one-stop for parents, because when they go there, they're gonna be able to talk to transportation, they're gonna be able to talk to special needs, they're gonna be able to talk to our English language department, and obviously our intake in the early child care and other students. So it creates a situation where it will be everyone's first look at the district, knowing that it's all in one place. We're not gonna be sending parents from building to building to building to try and find their way through this. It can all be navigated in one place. It'll also allow us to keep all of our inventory in one place. And with that being said, it allows the city to have a 12 to 1,300 seat auditorium available for a lot of civic functions, but also the possibility for a rental situation.
So, Mr. Pacheco, would that be an agreement that these enter into with the city in terms of who's responsible for the building? I know you say 50-50, but somebody's gotta be responsible for, future investments. I mean, is there gonna be some written or some memorandum of understanding with the city in terms of, it's a 50-50 split, but, someone's gotta take ownership of what needs to happen, have that decision on the schools, on the city. Just some things just some preliminary questions. I mean, I think we're still some time away from those final decisions, but some thoughts that I have. I mean, I agree, it's probably best upon them because we have a need for it, benefit from a performing arts center for its citizens to you. Just ironing out some of those details I think would be helpful going forward, but not necessarily something we need to do tonight or given that it's not something that's gonna be turned around probably until at least 22, I'm guessing.
Yes, and I to be totally honest, I would say it would be extremely advantageous for the school department to maintain control of the building and do the upkeep of the building, even if that cost is shared with the city. It would also allow the Durfee Performing Arts to use the building when they need to use it. So let's say you book that whole year, no matter who's running the building, X amount of hours, X amount of days would be used for the school department. They would have their choice of those days, and then the rest could be rentals. Our facility at the other side has everything that this facility has except for capacity. The high school is a 750 seat capacity. This is, not double it, but at least 1.5 times. And, but as far as band rooms and all of those other things that happen at this building, that's duplicated already in the new high school. So if we could maintain control for that alone, but I think that we have the capacity by the size of our facility's operation to maintain the building. I don't want to say better than the city, but it's just we're there every day, and the opportunity for us to take care of it is going to be a lot easier than the city taking care of it. So I'm sure we could, when the time comes, that we can put together that MOU or MOA to make this work worthwhile for both sides.
Thank you, I yield.
Any discussion, Mr. Hart?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and, just, Kenny, I just wanna make sure I got this correct. When that bridge is gone, okay, that connects the, I think it's the office to the music department,
Yes,
and as you walk, you take a left to go, and then to the right, you go into the industrial, I think the industrial classes, is that's what that is there.
yes, exactly,
That we are talking,
Yes.
all those offices going to be located.
right. Once that bridge is taken out, that building is standalone, it's the only connection to the two buildings.
Exactly. So that's where those
Yes,
okay. And when you get into the auditorium stack area, there's offices across from the theater. Those are already being used, correct?
so the offices across from the theater, the band wing would go as part of the theater. So if you're coming over the bridge from the high school, the band wing, which is on your left, would stay as part of the theater. When you get a little further and you go to the right, down towards the CTE programs, that would be part of the school side. And then the only thing that we would do as part of the idea, and again, I'm not that kind of decision maker, but I would envision that there would be a cafe set there. So if you're going to have the auditorium as a private function, and you may want to have a food and beverage venue built in, so that you could obviously service that group. That may be something that the school department or the city rents out to a private vendor, or it may be something that we can include in our culinary arts program, that when we have functions there, that they can be involved in, and the students could be paid to work that venue, such as our vocational school does. Diamond does a lot of functions at their restaurant. This would be an annex, so to speak, to the restaurant, to the Granite Grill at the other side, where we would be able to service our patrons who are going to the theater.
That's all I needed to know.
All right, so it's a great idea. We're gonna be looking for a motion to refer this to the full committee, the plan. So, Mr. Hart made the motion to refer this to the committee. We have a second.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Costa. I think it's great, there was some room at the other schools, increased capacity there.
Yes.
It's gonna be good for the community to have this, if it goes down, the way we envision it's gonna happen. I think that's great. Secretary, we have a motion and a second.
Yes.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Costa?
Yes.
Mr.
Yes.
Hart?
Yes.
Mr. Hudson?
Yes. All right. Last item on the agenda tonight, discussion, window repair at Stone School at the West Hall building. Mr. Pacheco?
So, unlike some of the other buildings, the windows at the Stone School seem to be a much better quality. They are, you can still see out of them, but the mechanisms are really in rough shape. The caulking is decent, it's a little bit of touching up on the caulking, but the windows themselves are in really good shape. So what this proposal is a per window repair, a minimum of 25 windows, and it would replace all of the mechanical mechanisms in the windows. It would replace the locks. It would put a height restriction on the opening, so the windows would be kind of like Durfee. They'd open up 4 inches, which is the new standard, and it would probably give us from 8 to 10 years worth of life on those windows. Currently, they put books under them to hold them up. things like that, and sometimes those books end up outside. So it would be nice to have these windows, number one, a little safer by mechanisms actually holding the building, the windows up, but also it would allow the windows to be a little more energy efficient by tightening them up as opposed to the loose track that we currently have. It's an a la carte menu, as you can see on this particular item. This company, this is a proprietary device that they're putting on these windows. So it is a single source vendor. We've hunted around for repairs from some of these window companies, and the dollar amount is much higher. We're in the ranges of $350, $400 per window. So what we'd like to do is get a solid number. I didn't want to go any further than to this committee to get that proposal. But once we, if it is something that the committee wants to move forward, I will give you a window count. We will do a walkthrough of the building to see the minimum amount. Obviously, the 25 is the minimum amount for the company, but there may be a minimum amount that we need to work on above that 25. And then if it's the committee's will to do all of the windows in the place, I'll let you know. We'll let you know what that number is and whether or not they can do a little better than the prices they have here.
Mr. Costa?
Mr. Chairman, I can just ask Mr. Pacheco, the number of windows over at Stone?
I'm sorry, I should have that number, but the amount of buildings that I've been counting windows in are all running together. So my best guess on the windows in this building is somewhere around 75.
Okay.
But that's 75 doubles, so that could be 100, 100 windows in certain places. And it could be up to 100 windows, not counting the doubles. So I think I can get you that accurate number, and I will have that for Monday if you so choose to move this forward.
No, that's fine, I just saw the minimum of 25 windows, and I think the price range was around $220-something, 200 a piece or something like that for that amount.
Yes,
I just didn't know the total, 25 windows times the amount they're looking for, like $6,200, I think. And that's why I was just curious, how many windows are we looking at, and, bulk, if we did all the window, roughly how much would that cost? And even if they were still looking at about 13 grand, it looks like me.
Yes.
I mean, again,
Yes.
that's based on the number of windows and the price they're looking for. Are you looking for the committee to refer this to the full committee, or?
I would like that, if that's something you wanna move forward, and in the meantime, I will get an accurate count on the windows, both, basement and I will separate them by floor so that, we can make decisions you can make decisions based on that.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I think it's a good idea of moving along to the full committee for at least discussion purposes, and whether or not they wanna take, final action on it will be that level. But, I did note that the, president of this sole proprietor was, Michael W. Fox, which I think is pretty cool. Probably relations to Michael J. But, I'll make that motion to refer to the full committee, for this, Mr. Chairman.
All right, motion made by Mr. Costa, is there a second?
Yeah, I'll second it.
Excellent. Any discussion? Hearing no discussion. Motion has been made by Mr. Costa, seconded by Mr. Hart. Madam Secretary, roll call, please.
Mr. Costa?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
Mr. Hudson?
Yes. All right, that motion carries. Let's get to the agenda items. Any new business?
No.
Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
A motion to adjourn.
So move, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Motion to adjourn made by Mr. Hart, seconded by Mr. Costa.
Mr. Costa?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
Mr. Hudson?
Yes, meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank
Thank you.
you.